Big money up for grabs on Saturday at Kentucky Downs. Race 8 is the Mint Millions. Let's take a look at the field. Gino, Buccola, and David Aragona here. Thanks so much for joining us on the DRF YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe below. As we take a look at this field, David, Ancient Rome towards the outside would be no shock, getting a lot of support. This was last year's winner here, but Ancient Rome, the running style that comes from off the pace, a horse that's probably going to have a lot to deal with late in here. So a horse that, at least on the front end, maybe worth trying to take a shot against. You have a horse like Goliad, who's wheeling back in just 6 days off of that big front-running victory. We have Irish Aces, who's wheeling back quickly. So some of these connections are trying to take advantage of that short Kentucky Downs meet and get a couple races over the track.
I was following our colleague, Marcus Hirsch, who did report that some of the horses coming back on short rest or that were entered back on short rest, their connections are planning on running on Saturday. So we'll see. This field should hold together after scratches. It does feel like Ancient Rome is the horse to beat after winning this Mint Millions last year. But as Kentucky Downs continues to give away more and more money each year, it feels like these races get a little stronger each season. So it does seem like Ancient Rome is going to have to beat a slightly better field in this Mint Millions than he defeated last year.
Well, let's take a look at the field, and let's start with the pace projector. How is it going to set up, David? When you have a runoff horse like Goliad, sometimes we can get these strangely run races where you'll have one horse 5 or 6 lengths out in front. It doesn't set up like a normally run race where horses are within a few lengths of each other, and then weird things can happen. Do you see Goliad being kind of a runoff again in here?
It feels like the pace of this race is going to be a critical component to the outcome because Goliad is fast and he's going to go forward from the outside. But there are other horses in this race that need to be forward to have their best chance, particularly the horse that's shown right inside of Goliad on the pace projector, the number 6 Strong Quality. He's a horse that basically needs to be in front to have a chance to win his races, or at least vying for the front end. So you would think that they're going to ride him aggressively. And even the 3 that are shown behind those 2, Fantastic Again, Talk of the Nation, even Touch Revenge is a horse that does his best running on the front end. So it feels like this is going to be a pretty contentious pace, and I'll be interested to see how quickly they go and if that is able to set it up for some of the closers.
Yeah, some of those pressers too. They're classy horses who can show that natural tactical speed. Let's move to Emmanuel and let's go horse by horse in this field. He's always been a really intriguing horse to me. He's a 5-time graded stakes winner, and he's always really been competitive in spots like this, these grade 3 races. It just seems like when he steps up and faces grade 1 company, he's a little overmatched. When he's in races like this, he almost always runs well. He chased a lone speed winner last time out in the United Nations. He really did close pretty well. 2 starts back, you see he was behind Ottoman Fleet, who won back-to-back stakes races. You go through some of the horses that beat him, Master of Seas and Casa Creed, some nice horses. I feel like I wanted to like him more than I do in this spot. I think he fits at the level, but I just can't get as good of a read on him, David. What do you think about Emmanuel in here?
I found him to be a really tough call in this race. Like you said, he's a horse that does have races in his PPs that make him very competitive in here, but he can be a little bit of an all or nothing type. You see that in his career box. He did run pretty well last time, even though he finished out of the trifecta in the United Nations. I thought Irad gave him a pretty good trip after getting a little shuffled back in the early stages, going the mile and 3/8, but he can get the mile distance. Very interesting that Winstar and Todd Pletcher, the prior connections, put him up for auction recently. He sold for $500,000 to New Connections and Mike Maker. You wonder if they purchased this horse with this race in mind to pay that much. I think you have to have, a goal in the near future. Not often you see full horses that are 5-year-olds with these kind of accomplishments go up for sale at public auction. But this one did. We'll see if he can reward the New Connections first off that trainer switch.
Mountain Bear is multiple graded stakes placed, was actually the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf in 2023. This year so far in 4 starts has not been able to win, but does come off of the best effort so far when a runner-up closing very well for second in a Group 3 over at Leopardstown. Faced really tough company in the first start of the year at the Curragh and the Irish 2000 Guineas, and then was your beaten favorite last time out on July the 21st. So the form's been a little enigmatic this year, 10-1. Another horse who I wouldn't be shocked to see him come running late, but I needed to see a little bit more before kind of putting him on top for myself.
Yeah, it's one of those Aiden O'Brien horses where it feels like they're trying to figure things out with him since coming back this year. You might remember he came out of that Breeders' Cup with a fracture last year, got a little bit of a late start to his 3-year-old campaign, and clearly needed that race off the layoff in the Irish 2000 Guineas. And since then, he's run pretty well in 2 of his last 3 starts. And note that the race 2 back at the Curragh, he completely blew the start that day. He just stood in the gate when the other horses left. So I wouldn't read too much into that result. His last race was a big step in the right direction, made a nice late run. And it's interesting when you look through his form, only 4 times has he run on race courses that have a turn. The others have been straightaways. And you could argue those are his 4 best races. And he's going to be on that kind of configuration at Kentucky Downs on Saturday. So pretty interesting that they're bringing him here. And I think he's a horse that might still have some upside.
Irish Aces, grade 3 place stakes winner, just won at Kentucky Downs on August the 29th. So they wheel back quickly, just 9 days after. And he's faced some sharp horses recently. 2 starts back was behind Taking Candy, who came back and finished second in the Bernard Baruch. Ottoman Fleet, who he lost to when finishing third, came back and won a couple starts. So I think he's an interesting horse in some of the under exotics here, but I just don't know if he's quite as good as that top tier of horses. But he's honest and he really does try hard. Like he is a trier here. Can he at least hit the board and be competitive with this group?
Yeah, we'll take a look at his recent victory in the Tapit Stakes just last week. Coming back on short rest, like you said, I think he's stepping up against a much tougher field here. And I don't know, Gino, watching this race, he got such a good trip when they came to the top of the stretch. You're almost expecting him to win by 2 or 3 lengths, given the trip that he got. And he really has a tough time getting by this leader in the late stages. It was a race that didn't feature a whole lot of pace and it held together up front, but I was just a little bit underwhelmed by this performance. And I do think he's going to have to improve a little bit to beat this field. He's got solid races. He's got back form that puts him in the mix, but I think more so for a minor award.
Yeah, that sort of felt like his day. We can understand why they'll wheel back and take another bite at the apple here, but I think we probably got his race, his big one, last weekend. Let's continue along, David. We go to Cash Equity next. Grade 2 place, 0 for the last 10, but 7 top 3 finishes. It was second in the Barbados Gold Cup earlier this year. He is a horse that I think just running the same races that he's been running in some of his better races early on fit with this group. Cash Equity is a horse that I think you have towards the bottom of the exotics.
Yeah, it's a horse that I think when you look at his recent form, you might have an inclination to say he's just a little overmatched because he's only been able to achieve minor awards against somewhat lesser competition. But then you keep in mind that pace projector and the horses that are shown towards the back of the pack that might get the right kind of setup in here. And you look at Cash Equity's recent races, and he's just been in paceless race after paceless race, and he's actually been running on really strongly at the ends of those races. And now he's finally going to get into a race that features a much more favorable flow for him, and maybe he's going to run a little bit better. I think he's going to be a decent price for a barn that you don't often get double digits on in Safi Joseph, and he's one that I definitely want to include somewhere in my exotics.
He's another one of those horses that wheels back real quickly, was chasing Goliad and just had no chance in that race and a few prior to it. Tut's Revenge, you pointed out a possible pace factor in here. He's won back-to-back races right on the front end, multiple stakes winner. He's always been a little bit in tough against graded stakes company, and I could see him out front. That's usually how he outruns his odds, when he is able to kind of slow things down and get a nice pace shape. I think there are a couple other tougher horses in here for him.
Yeah, it was unwise to go against the Flying P Mike Maker horses at the recently completed Saratoga meet. We'll see if that transitions over to Kentucky Downs with Tut's Revenge. He just felt pretty fortunate in his last couple of victories in Kentucky at Churchill and Ellis. And I think he's going to face a much more difficult pace scenario also against a tougher field on Saturday. So he might have his work cut out for him.
Strong quality, multiple stakes winner, dropping out of grade 1 company, but he's just been really one-dimensional. I guess early on in his career, he showed he could kind of fall into it and sit just off horses, and he'd have to do the same exact thing in here again, David, because Goliad wants to go, he wants to go, and something's got to give in that situation. He just doesn't seem as fast as Goliad, so I have a hard time projecting the trip that he would get to win this race.
I mean, I guess the connections might be thinking they'll get the kind of trip that they got on the Dirt 3 back when he won the Knicks Go, going to the half in 44-3 that day. Yeah. I personally didn't know that Strong Quality had that kind of speed in him, but he did, and he was able to keep going. And he seems equally talented on the dirt and the turf. So maybe if he can produce that kind of performance, he can keep going. But even then, I think there were stronger finishers in this race than there were in that Knicks Go. So he still could have a tough time seeing it out. He's likely to get an aggressive ride. I just worry about how fast they're going to go up front.
Okay, David, I'm going to sell you a little bit here on Fantastic again as we get to the next runner. I like this one in here. Coming off of the Shoemaker Mile last time out when finishing second, they've rerouted this horse a few different times for this spot. I think he's been entered a few different spots. If you look at that Shoemaker Mile race, he was behind a horse named Johannes, who has won 3 in a row. Third place finisher in that race, De Jour, is a grade 1 winner. The fourth place finisher, There Goes Harvard, is a grade 1 winner on the dirt. Sixth place finisher, Easter, is a multiple graded stakes winner. The eighth place finisher, Air Force Red, is a grade 2 winner. And Goliad was in there at the end, that field. Conclude is also a multiple graded stakes winner. Why I like Fantastic again, and as we watch the replay, he's shown us that he can sit in a race where Goliad runs off. And that may be the case in here. So if Goliad tries to run off, we've seen Fantastic sit off of him patiently and have no problem doing that. So when I'm looking at some of the horses in here and what types of trip they're going to get, I've seen Fantastic again get the kind of trip that he may need to in here, where maybe he's sitting third. He lets a horse like Goliad go off. He's a couple lengths behind. As he's gotten a little bit older, he's shown us the ability to sit more. And I think for him, David, when you focus on his races at a mile on the turf or synthetic, the mile and an eighth races, probably a little bit farther than where he wants to go. I'm hoping we can get a decent price in here. I feel like he'll get a good trip. He'll sit third or fourth and have every opportunity if the fields come back to him.
I've got a lot of respect for this horse. I agree with everything you said about his last performance in the Shoemaker Mile. That was arguably the best last race of anybody in this field, given the way that the race dynamics played out and how game he was to the wire, fighting back inside of Johannes. I do always get a little scared with these Wesley Ward horses that just seem to run by appointment only. I mean, they have layoffs between every start, but you look up some of the stats in Formulator, 3 to 6 months in stakes races, 3 to 6 month layoff. Wesley Ward is 13 for 46 with a 28% win rate, 216 ROI. So he seems to have success with these kinds of horses. My worry with him is the pace, because he hasn't really done it coming from further back in the pack. And I just feel like he's probably going to be a little further off the pace than he's used to running in his A efforts. And I just wonder how he's going to adapt to that kind of trip.
And that might be the same case for Talk of the Nation right next door, right? Who has that same sort of running style. I know you're going to mention I think a formulator fact that we have for Talk of the Nation and trainer Todd Pletcher.
Yeah, Todd Pletcher does not run a ton of horses at Kentucky Downs and really hasn't had much success at all over the past 5 years. Just 2 for 29 in all races. I think he's 1 for 16 in stakes within that sample, a low ROI. So Todd Pletcher just doesn't really point horses to this meet that much in Talk of the Nation. He's running here off a decent fourth place finish in the Arlington Million, a mile and a quarter. You could argue was a little too far for this horse, and turning back to the mile should help him. But he's another one of these horses that wants to be forwardly placed. And while I respect his recent form, I just wonder about what kind of trip he's going to get in here. So at a shortish price, he was not for me.
Yeah, I same sort of. I can see him underneath. I think he can fall into hitting the board in here. Let's move to the outside, David. Reckoning Force is a horse who comes off of a good effort last time out and is in really nice form when you dive into the races this year. I think 3 of the last 4 races have been very, very solid. Talk to us about Reckoning Force, who you like at a little bit of a price.
Yeah, I think when you start to glance at his form, you might say that he's just not good enough and he hasn't run fast enough and he's faced weaker competition. And I get all of that, but he is in good form right now. And I think when you look specifically at his last couple of races, he ran even better than the finishes would indicate, because he was 3 wide with no cover 2 back in that race at Churchill Downs. And I thought ran the best race of all to only get beaten a half length by Gray's Fable. There have been some decent runbacks out of that race. And then last time at Saratoga, yes, it was a weaker field, but again, he had no cover that day, was just stalking outside, was a little too keen throughout, but still found enough to hold off all the closers at the finish. And now he's landing in a race where he's going to get more pace to close into. I know that it might seem, based on his recent form, like he's a horse that wants to be forward, but I actually don't mind him getting the kind of closing trip where he's going to get pace and run through the pack. He has done it in the past. He actually ran really well with that kind of trip, going back to his race off the layoff in May at Churchill Downs. I just think he's a horse that's going to be a big price, is doing really well right now, and is going to get the right kind of trip.
Ancient Rome comes off of a 3rd place finish in the Arlington Million when behind Nation's Pride and Integration. There was no pace in that race. He had a slow start. He was last early on, about 7 lengths off, chasing those slow fractions. He ducked down to the inside and shifted down late. He actually was in second and then lost second late. Multiple graded stakes winner, multiple grade 1 placed. He'll take a lot of money. He'll come running late. I just like others a little bit more based on the price that they will be, and maybe getting a little bit better trips that they could get the jump on a horse like Ancient Rome. How do you think he fares in this one?
Yeah, he got an interesting trip in this race last year because everything could not have gone more perfectly for him when he won the Mint Millions back in 2023. That was a race where he broke very sharply, which has not always been his forte throughout his career, when he just got into a forward position and was able to win the race from there. He's typically more of a closing type, and now he's landing in a race with more speed, so maybe that's going to work for him. He did hop at the start of the Arlington Million last time, which I think put him even further back than he otherwise would have been. I like the mile. He obviously classes up. He makes a ton of sense in this race. I just don't think you're going to get much price on him with all of those obvious merits of him having handled the course before and the pace being in his favor. So I don't know if value is going to be there, but he's a horse that I could see running well.
Rounding out the field is Goliad, Grade 3 winner, who went gate to wire on September 1st at Kentucky Downs just 6 days ago. Wheels back quickly. Flavian Pratt jumps aboard. The game plan has got to be get aggressive because, David, this horse does not want to sit off at all. He just wants to go. And I kind of find it refreshing when you have horses like this nowadays who you just know are going to be on the front end, because so often we find it difficult actually handicapping who is going to be on the front end. So he has a big say in how this race unfolds.
He is a true runoff. I mean, he is unrateable. They've just got to let him go, allow him to go as fast as he can, get comfortable. He was able to do that in that race at Kentucky Downs last week. I mean, you see they went to half in 45-2. If you did not look at the fractions and just watch the visual of Goliad just loping along down the backstretch, you would think he was going in 48. He was doing it so easily, but that's just the way he runs. He's very comfortable with a high cruising speed. I think he's going to get pressure here, though, because we talked about strong quality, others with speed. It's just hard to see him getting as comfortable on the front end as he did last time. And I think even his best effort might not quite be good enough to beat a field like this.
Yeah, the point that you made, not even strong quality, but like that next tier of horses, like the Talk of the Nation, Fantastic Again, Touch Revenge horses, that could all be pressing and just making him go even a little faster to continue to have that separation. I just don't see it playing out all that well for him, but he'll be out front winging it on the front end. Let's go to the selections now, David. You'll go looking for a little bit of a price in here.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a stretch for a lot of people when you look at the form on Reckoning Force, but I just think this horse is really doing well right now. Like I said, the trips did not work out perfectly the last couple of times. I like him getting pace, and Brendan Walsh does very well at this meet. Luan Machado, I think, is a highly underrated jockey that is not going to attract the kind of support that these connections really should. And it's just a horse I want to take a shot with at a price. I do respect Mountain Bear quite a bit. He's another price that I want to use in this race, but there are many ways to go. You can see from my picks, I just wanted to find some value in a race that I think is pretty wide open.
Yeah, for me, it'll really come down to, can strong quality do the dirty work and be the horse that puts the pressure on Goliad? If so, I'm hoping the two horses that might just kind of fall into the okay trips and get the jump on some of the deeper closers are the 7, Fantastic Again, who just shown recently he's a little bit more comfortable sitting off the pace than I think Talk of the Nation is. So if they have to get shuffled back a little bit farther, that's why I leaned with Fantastic Again on top. Talk of the Nation, maybe he's just sitting and kind of falls into a nice spot. Use the 10 Ancient Rome there. And then Emmanuel, didn't really know what to do with him, so kind of put him on the bottom of the exotics. David's looking for a little more value here. I'm going to go 7, 8, 10, 1. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel below. We'll be back with many more previews. It's a big Saturday over at Kentucky Downs. Good luck.